One. We a panel about marketing seed. So we have Grace Allen, Chloe Ivanoff, and Mark Blakesley. They're just going to talk about their experience direct marketing things, and they're going to introduce themselves and tell you more about um what they've done to direct market in our community. Grace.
Hi, my name's Grace. I grew up fishing in Kodiak with my family, and now I run our family boat to fish halibut. For me, local food has always been really important, and one of the most special things when it comes to Alaska seafood is that we have this bounty of amazing food just right out our back door. Um, Direct marketing seemed like a no-brainer to me because you see the prices we're getting at the dock, and then you see the prices they're selling it at the store, and you're like, well, how could this not be a good idea? Um, and so when halibut prices were pretty low about a year ago, I thought it would be a good time to try it. Uh, and it turns out it's way more complicated and stressful and costly than I originally expected. So I'm still trying to figure out what works for me. I've focused recently on selling wholesale to local grocery stores, restaurants, and some direct marketers that don't have access to halibut themselves, which has worked okay. It's definitely like a lower price point that you can get if you are selling direct to the consumer, but selling direct to the consumer is takes a lot of time, just communicating and shipping. Um, and I would like to start doing that more. I just need to find the right way to do it. And that's where I'm at.
Hello. My name is Chloe. I was part of a seafood business called Ivanhoe Seafood for like I think we did it for about 2 years, and we kind of recently dissolved just because different challenges, kind of some stuff that Grace has already said, but we um, saw a hole in the market. Like, oh wow, Kodiak has so much amazing seafood. Like, why is it not so more available to locals? So our initially we started because we wanted to fill that gap, and you'd think we hear it all the time. People would be like, well, where can we buy seafood? And it's like, oh yeah, you're right. Like there was one storefront from at one of the canneries for a little while, but before that, since that closed, there wasn't a lot of options. So we tried to fill that niche, and then we were selling at like our local farmers markets, a little bit at some local stores, and then we started shipping and kind of ran into some logistical challenges like well, shipping is really expensive from Alaska. Like if you're all, shipping from some rural area, you're dealing with like costs, and commercial freezer space is really challenging. I'm sure you heard about that a lot at the this conference. Um, and so different stuff like that kind of you have to figure out what's it worth, what's your time worth, right?
Your mic's cutting out.
Oh no. Oh yeah, the battery. We can use that one.
Switch or rotate it?
So I will try not to be too wordy, and you guys can ask questions if you want. But yeah. So we no longer are selling through that business. We kind of just decided we're taking a step back, and I don't know if we'll start selling again or not. But yeah, I learned a ton. So you can ask some questions. But I'm certainly no expert. But if you have any good questions.
Okay, I guess this can be sort of the intro, and then maybe we can get some feedback and bounce some things around. But my name is Mark Blakesley. I'm having a 36-foot sort of work boat, which I set up for jigging. I do engineering and rocketry and diving and things like that. So sort of trying to optimize my effort for my income sometimes. And had been doing jigging with my little boat and just selling to the cannery, and this is jigging is either for cod or for rockfish around here, and the seasonality, there's with rockfish there's a quota. Cod, there's a pretty big quota, but a lot of people go after it, so it's things have kicked off a little earlier in the year lately, to the point where the weather's still pretty crappy for the 36-foot boat with little bow. So sometimes the quota gets gobbled up before I'm really ready to hit it too hard. But when COVID came, it's like, what am I going to do? And I could get 5,000 pounds of round fish in my little boat in a day or two. And that yields like 1,700 pounds of really nice vacuum sealed frozen fillets. So I had a couple thousand pounds of fish in a freezer on a pallet. And so now what do I do? And so I really did take it direct to the locals, set up a table outside the brewery, and was selling fish at a level that was, you know, maybe I was pocketing $2.50 a pound instead of $1 a pound, just selling it to the cannery. So uh, that experience sort of was, ultra local. And after it, everybody would get a little bit of product, 5 pounds at a time, or 2 pounds, or uh, I gave some to some seniors, a super discount, and built a trust and a market where people, kept on, would just see me in the street or call me and ask me if I had any fish, and kind of built that up to an extent as far as credibility and reputation and trust. So I think there's a lot to that in the fishing business. You can abuse your product and it's not obvious looking at it for a customer when they buy it. Is this fish going to be good or not? And so there has to be a trustworthiness. Um, and with trustworthiness, you have to have a product that's not just a commodity. It has to have a story to it. A brand, I guess, is the typical way to establish trust. But so maybe I had a brand there for a while, but really you have to. It's nice to get the big sale, like 1,000 pounds at a time. It's nice to also take your 5,000 pounds and just get the fish ticket and get a check later on, and not have to think about what's going on with that fish anymore. So the process. So you bring the fish to the custom processor, and that would cost you like $3.50 a pound of finished product. So you're already adding up. Then your refrigeration and a cold storage is going to keep everything at 0 degrees or below. That can add up to, say, $250 a month for one pallet. So pretty soon you're like, I got to sell this fish. Plus, it's not getting any fresher, even at 0 degrees or 10 below. There is a shelf life to an extent. So those are all the challenges. And as Chloe said, shipping is something where I had friends in Florida and Georgia and different places around the country, and they're like, "Oh, can we get some of your fish?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you bet. It's $12 for the fish, and then it's going to be another $4 a pound for the shipping." So it's still cheaper and better than something they can get at the store down there, uh, if they appreciate it, and for the most part they did. However, if they want 10 pounds instead of 50 pounds, then the price is like $8 a pound for shipping FedEx. So those are just kind of the dilemmas. And given that I had other things going on, I haven't even fished this year. I let that slip out of my fingers. Need to reinstall my raw water pumps and get back out there. But so I think those are the main things: are trust, and you have to also trust your processor to not just leave totes on the dock for X number of days. You have to deal with the shipping, you have to deal with the refrigeration, and you have to spend time networking and marketing and making the phone calls and following each shipment to make sure it gets where it's supposed to go. So it kind of depends on, I think a lot of husband-wife teams do pretty well this. But in the fishing business, a lot of times it's volume and scaling up and getting a boat that can carry 80,000 pounds or 100,000 pounds in one load. So then if you had 20,000 pounds of fillets to deal with, you really got something to think about. So that kind of sums it up from my perspective. Does anybody out there have any questions, or are you interested in buying some rock fillets, for example? I think. So I met Haley.
Oh yeah.
How is she? Are you guys? You guys work with her, or is she
Yeah.
associated with your?
Oh yeah. Hello, hello.
Oh.
Be quiet. Oh, hello, people online. Okay, yeah, you asked if I how I was connected to Haley. So she's my sister-in-law, and we started that business with my two brothers and now sister-in-law, and that was also kind of shortly after COVID, and we're like, oh, we have a commercial fishing family commercial fishing business. It seemed to we wanted to fill this like hole in the local market, and we were really passionate about local food, and so we jumped in pretty quickly and learned a ton. Like there's just a lot of little logistics to work out, and yeah, and kind of I feel like got burnt out after a couple years, but it was really fun, and I feel like I learned a lot about just small businesses. So yeah, she's my sister-in-law, and we're not really selling any fish to there right now. Maybe not ever again, but maybe, who knows?
You guys primarily will use stores to custom process your fish, and then do you usually retain ownership of it all the way through, or will you like sell it to wild stores and buy it back to wild stores, or how do you usually work the?
As far as I know, there's a couple different ways to go about it. You can have your own, you can do your own fish tickets and just sit and you retain ownership of it. But the way I've done it is that you sell it to them and then I have my own business license to then buy that fish back from them. So they're taking on like the onus of the paperwork part. But it's been really complicated between the 3 or 4 different state agencies that are they're interested in this. And they're not always all on the same page. And I think all of us have had to be on the phone with Fish and Game and then DEC and then the troopers and then if it's federal, it's somebody else. And you have to be like, well, they told me this. And then they say, well, that's wrong. And then you like call them back and say, well, they told me this. And when it comes to ownership of the fish and keeping track of the paperwork, it can get really complicated. And I would say don't be afraid to keep calling people and to get a straight answer, is my experience.
Yeah, so I guess it's Fish and Game. Maybe it's the Department of Finance, but there's a catcher seller license where you can stock only, and then there's a direct marketer license, and then there's a processor license, and you can process your own fish or process somebody else's fish, and there's floaters and land-based plants. Anyway, the catcher seller really doesn't give you much. And if you want to have somebody custom process your fish, you need to get the direct marketer. So that's the first boo-boo I made, was to get the catcher seller, and then you can't get your fish processed with that license. Okay, well, I'll get the direct marketer. There is a little bit of overhead with that. You have to fill out a form called the COAR, COAR. Forget what that stands for. We should all probably do that any day now, because I think it's due. Yeah, right. I always forget. And then there's and you declare how many pounds you got and what value it had, and then there's fish tax to the Department of Revenue, and that's got a similar deadline, and it's not very much, but and generally they just send me nasty grams that you didn't do this. I said, oh, darn it. Well, I'll do it as soon as I can, and it's like $24 that I owe them, and then nobody's too mad, but um, so that is a recurring, so there's a paperwork. You just need to think and remember to do certain things, or if you don't do that, then you get nasty emails. So not the worst thing in the world, but um, so so the direct marketer is a pretty good deal, but unless you want to be a processor, I mean, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be in your life? And if you want to catch fish, sometimes the people that specialize in are great at catching fish and catch 1 million pounds of fish or 2 million pounds of fish end up not wanting to sell that at the brewery. And uh, so that's where the cannery sure will take your 2 million pounds of fish, and the price isn't great, but you're giving them a cut because they're doing a great service. And when that fish is offloaded off your boat and you just Cloroxed your fish hold, you tie up the boat, you can go to Mexico or whatever. So not to say that being a direct marketer isn't fun and great for certain people, but it is starts to spread you out into catching the fish and dealing with a processor and selling the fish and refrigerating the fish, and then you got to go fishing again. So one other thing that occurred to me was that you have to deal with a processor, and that processor also may want to sell the same fish that you produce. Sometimes I deliver some to a market and some to get processed, and I'll sell it myself. But then the processor has a load of fish and his own refrigeration. He can undersell me, and that can be aggravating. So you have to have trust with your clientele, but you also have to have trust with your processor. So it's a little complicated.
Thanks. Elizabeth here with the Local Catch Network, and I work with direct marketers all over Alaska and the country. And what I'm hearing from you guys, I've heard from many, many others. So you're not alone, and that's part of why Local Catch Network exists, to kind of create community in the local seafood system, because everyone is sort of just grinding away and trying to troubleshoot and figure out all these navigate, really complicated systems. So how do we share? And I'm just curious, in the community of Kodiak, have you guys, are there conversations about fishermen's cooperatives or, ways to work together to kind of lighten the load so everyone's not sort of creating their own wheel and getting burnt out? And, I know there's the Seafood Producers Cooperative in Sitka, which is its own model of a cooperative, and talked to fishermen in Juneau and Bristol Bay. Considering it, I'm just curious, like, are there ways to pool together to figure some of this out so it's not on each of you individually? And just curious what those conversations have looked like or could be.
That is a great question. I feel like it could get a little bit complicated if just a lot of direct marketers, I think, like in this group or other ones in Kodiak, it's like challenging enough to deal with your own fish, and then maybe to like add more people. Maybe if there was a really large commercial freezer space and you could pool resources that way, or like everybody pays for one person to be their coordinate marketing and all the admin stuff. Maybe there is value in that, but then once you start dispersing all that, the funds the money made on that. I don't know. But you would maybe need some help to make that work, but I don't know. At some point you might be like, yeah, let's just, as Mark said, just deliver to the cannery and go to Mexico. It makes me think of this course with Alaska Sea Grant about like direct marketing your seafood. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was like, all right, what's your time worth? Because at the end of the day, like you think, oh, I'm making, you know, $15 a pound on this sockeye or something, but at the cannery would pay me 50 cents a pound or something. But then if you quantify how many hours you actually took to sell that, to coordinate everything to get it to the consumer, like maybe you really made like 25 cents a pound or something like that. So you have to really think about what your time is worth. And yeah, that's.
I just want to say that like we don't have any like official co-op, although I do think there would be value in that. I just don't know how to go about organizing that. But I have called Chloe and Haley dozens and dozens of times when I was trying to set up, and Mark trying to set up my business, because like I do think, and we're all calling each other like, did you deal with this license? Which license do you have? Like, how do you approach this tax and stuff like that? Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I do think like there like is a non-official cooperation, but it would be valuable to have a more formal one. But again, like with the cost of doing that outweigh the benefit, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, folks who aren't familiar with Local Catch Network, I encourage you. We've got a website online, obviously online, but on our website we've got a lot of resources. We offer trainings. Luke's been part of our sort of business accelerator program. Yeah, Ivanov, I think you guys were too, and so a lot of what we do is provide that sort of technical assistance support, trainings, and then, again, like community, just so folks can share with each other, like what your struggles have been, what your successes have been, how do we learn from each other? And, we've found in our work around North America is like, we have a lot more in common. Doesn't matter where you're fishing, and like, how do we sort of figure this stuff out together, whether it's distribution, logistics, transportation costs, things like that. And so, just it's free to join, very easy to join. And it's just really about sharing with each other. And, again, we're here to provide resources. So, maybe a separate conversation offline. I just would love your thoughts on like specifically what, especially in looking back on your experiences the last few years, what would have been helpful for you? What would have made things easier? Because we can help develop those kinds of resources and make them available. So, but yeah, Local Catch Network. So check us out.
Yeah, true.
I'm hoping that, so I'm with Kodiak Harvest Food Co-op, and going forward, we want to have like more resources for our producers. I forced all of them to be up there today. And we're kind of like kicking off our local food production committee. And so I think that maybe there's some things that we're going to have like sections for like homemade food, fishers, and agriculture. And maybe there's some of that we could integrate into being like, here's, like as basic as you can get, like, are you interested in this? No, just kidding. Like steps 1 through 5. And like, I think that the Kodiak Harvest can maybe kind of help facilitate some of that as well for the people who are our producers.
Right. I'm the microphone person. Oh, good. I like it. I'm getting my steps up. Oh, it's loose, I think. Yeah, so I think I could add that it depends on what your product is. Like the halibut is an IFQ fishery, so you can harvest it anytime from sometime in March till sometime in November now, December. So, but you don't really want to run a boat and burn $1,000 worth of fuel to get 100 pounds of halibut. You know, you'd want to load the boat ideally, or, you know, so you always are dealing with a volume of product. There's salmon that they've got a sizable seiner and can long line and get codfish and, you know, lots of species. Some like the salmon come when they come, and the season is maybe June to September for different species. But trying to time the production with the consumption is a challenge, and refrigeration is great, but can only go so far. So connecting nationally with markets, and I'm not sure how much education has to be done to uh, make the markets appreciate the product. But that's something that probably people with a boat in the harbor in Kodiak aren't going to be able to afford on for the most part. Now there is Tolliff and Adelia, was it Soulmate Fisheries in Uganic? They have a set site. They're growing some kelp or trying to grow some kelp, and they had product that was like salmon jerky and frozen smoked salmon, high value, but especially the jerky has a good shelf life. And then they would go. Tolliff just got back from travels to the Midwest and the Great Lakes area where he has some family, and they've been doing that every year. So that's a big value adder. And so bring the product to the people. And the guy that got me into jigging, Ryan Horwath, he promoted Sitka Salmon Shares ownership. Now that when I was a little bit interested, that was going to be 20 grand to get a partnership in with them. And I was grossing about 10 grand a year. So just didn't have the cash flow and whatnot. Anyway, are we going to, one more minute? Wah, wah.
That how you catch the bulk of your cod and
Rockfish, yeah.
that big?
Yeah, the main thing for me is it doesn't take much equipment and it doesn't take an expensive permit, so it's an entry level deal. But the cost, the dock price for cod this year is 35. Last year was 25 cents, and rockfish $1. So compared with halibut, which I don't know, $4 or $5. Anyway, yes. So sorry, what's your question? Yeah, there's like a 2.5 million pound quota for cod this year, but only like 120,000 for rockfish. So kind of got to jump on it before it's all sucked up. Sorry about hogging the mic here. Any closing?
Good luck.
Thank you so much for being here. We're gonna take a minute to swap the slides and then we'll get our next speaker up.
Back there, so like the.
So the mics work best if you hold near the top, otherwise they like kind of skip a little bit.
Okay.
And I'm gonna pull up your slide. And you have to talk into the mic for Zoom people to hear you.
Okay.
So when there's audience questions, I try to get them to ask on the mic, but if they don't, just say like, your question was blah, blah.
And is there a clicker or are you advancing my slides?
There is the clicker.
Okay. Great.
So, you know, then adding some. Oh, who is that? Yeah, that would be great. So you, but and you are separate from Haley. I've the Ivanhoe plan. The diving project, Graceful Fisheries. Okay, I'm gonna be like somehow. I'm all set. Like I've got from this past season. I've got
I'll get him out.
24,000 pounds. I've got plenty of salmon to, so I have co-hosts too, but yeah, plenty of salmon.
Okay, direct marketing fisherman. Can you scoot to the side? Because we're going to roll into our next presenter, Sam Knapp from Fairbanks. I'm bringing you the clicker and then you'll be on your own.
All right, sounds great. Okay, sounds great. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for coming. We're at the end of a long, full weekend, and Emily is giving a great talk next door. So maybe some of you will join afterwards, remotely, or not remotely, but recorded. So I'm just going to jump into this. I'm Sam Knapp. I run Offbeet Farm in Fairbanks, and I'm going to talk today about storage farming. And what I mean by that is keeping crops grown in the summer into the winter time for selling and eating. A little bit about my farm. So Offbeet Farm is a diversified vegetable farm. It was started, or I started it, building it in 2020 after farming for a few years in Michigan. And Offbeet Farm, we sell exclusively storage crops during the winter time. So that's our entire revenue, which is unusual for market or diversified veggie farms. We have about an acre in production. It's a little bit less than that right now. I think later on I say it's like 0.9, but who's counting? And 80% of our sales come through a winter CSA, and right now we have 140 families in that CSA. Just giving you a little bit of history, the farm has scaled really quickly through some crazy years of work. This was in the fall of 2020 when I hired a crew of bulldozers and a friend with a chainsaw to come and clear roughly an acre and a half on our 3-acre property in Fairbanks. And worked really hard to turn the farm into a working vegetable farm. So this is 3 years later. The farm, yeah, this is about what it looks like now, with, like I said, just under an acre in production, all storage crops. So I have a personal goal of encouraging other farmers to do this. There are a lot of reasons why I think that our communities would benefit, our communities and farmers would benefit from storing veggies into the wintertime and selling them. And the first, and I think a very important one, is bolstering the local food movement. I think that there's a perception amongst the public that local growers cannot supply our food system because it often drops off as we go into wintertime. And so supplying them into the winter, I think, will make consumer confidence increase in what we can do. From the farming perspective, it spreads the workload of farming more evenly throughout the year, which will make a big impact as far as labor costs, which we'll do later. It definitely can help retain year-round employees on large farms that have a lot of employees. It can also help retain your customers throughout the year if you are a farm that sells during the summertime. In Fairbanks, I have the privilege right now of being the only diversified veggie farm that sells during the winter. The market was completely untapped. However, I welcome anybody to join me. If you think about just the vibrant marketplace that we have in the summer, all those people still live in Fairbanks in the winter and need to eat. So come join the fun. And food security. We all spend so much time talking about food security and food storage. Well, let's do it. There are some hurdles to getting into storage farming. And a big one that I'll start with is the learning curve. Storage farming is hard. There are a lot of things that you need to learn to do very quickly, and it kind of adds a level of risk. The photo on, let's see, the left side of the screen is onion curing. That's from a farm in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Just one of the many different things that you need to learn in order to become a commercial storage farm. I took on a crazy project. I decided to write a book about this a few years ago, and my publisher would be unhappy with me if I didn't mention that. So if you are interested in learning how to storage farm, I only have half an hour today. I'm not going to go that much into detail about the how. I really encourage you to check out the book. You can get it anywhere books are sold. So enough with that. Yeah. Okay, hurdle number 2 is infrastructure. Storage farms take a level of infrastructure beyond what most veggie farms have on hand, although that isn't always the case, as I'll talk about later. So this is the storage building that I built immediately for Offbeet Farm, and the inside of it, it's basically like a 25-foot square that I've broken in half. On the right side, you see the warm side, which is the packing side where I keep all my winter squash, but do all the packing of orders. And on the left, with the wet floors, I was bleaching that day and decided I'd take a picture while everything looked nice and clean, is the cold storage side. So on that side, I think I have capacity to fit maybe 30 to 40,000 pounds of veggies in there, and it's only a 12 by 24 room. So you can store a lot of veggies in a small space. Hurdle number 3 is there's an additional level of risk to storage farming. So not only do you need to produce a crop, but you need to keep it in storage and keep it in good condition until it's time to sell it. And if it goes bad, it's your loss. I'm not going to touch too much on this. This is a slide, a figure from the book, just getting at that different crops have different storage lives and different amounts that you always tend to lose while in storage. So when I'm planning for my CSA and my winter sales, I'm usually trying to be conservative, and I plan in 10 to 15% losses in storage. And that's just an inherent cost of doing this type of farming that there's no real good way to avoid. So you just plan for the loss and feel good about that when a bunch of beets go bad. Just going to give examples of some of the infrastructural needs, and I'm going to try and step over here. Some of the infrastructural needs and the costs associated with storage farming, with some examples from my farm. I found these two photos kind of cute next to each other just to show what things are like at different scales. So the ones with the buckets, that's my farm. That's a little less than an acre. I'm moving things around on hand carts and buckets. The one on the right is from Tippy Produce in southern Wisconsin. That's Steve Pincus there driving the forklift. And that's a scale of farming that if you have several acres of root crops, you're going to need some heavy lifting equipment. So integral to my farm is the vegetable storage building, which you saw earlier. This is a photo from it under construction. Hard to put an exact number on it, but it was around $55,000 to build that, and I built it mostly myself. Had I hired a contractor, it would have been double. And that was paid for mainly with an FSA loan. You're going to need some kind of refrigeration, humidification, and heating systems. On Offbeet Farm, those things together cost about $4,000. And we use relatively simple, inexpensive CoolBot systems, hijacking AC, window AC units. I'm about to upgrade to more powerful mini split units, but it's still not going to cost me more than 10 grand. Commercial cooling systems, I got quoted by a company in Fairbanks 40 grand for a remote condenser and evaporator system. So these can be extremely expensive, but CoolBot is a great way to kind of get in the door of commercial cooling, not so steep of a cost. You're going to need to have some kind of washing setup. My root washer, I wrote $1,000. I was talking with Brandy Joe earlier. I think 700 is probably closer to the mark. But again, this is something I built myself. Some kind of washing setup is going to be essential on a storage farm, whether you're buying it in or building it yourself. You're going to need storage containers. Some farms do store things in piles, but I think at the scales that most Alaskans are talking about, that is not an option most people will consider. And so I have a variety of different containers on the farm. Some things I'm storing in these 27-gallon totes that you can get from most hardware stores. I do store things in woven poly super sacks or sling bags that hold about 1,000 pounds of carrots each. Altogether, my storage containers cost about $4,000, and they're about the cheapest option I could get. I did get, hooray, an RFSI grant that supposedly the money will be coming to get some new storage containers, and that'll be about 25 grand, getting full bulk containers shipped up from the lower 48. So a lot of the stuff is expensive, but you need it to run a storage farm. Something I want to touch on, and we've been having kind of conversations on the side all this weekend in conference, is scaling and growing a business while at the same time needing to put a lot of money down and generate income at the same time. So without savings or outside income, new farms need to ramp into production quickly. And that's what we had to do. That summer of 2021, I don't think I've worked as hard in my life, and hopefully never have to since, or never have to do that again. That was a rough summer. But it did get us off the ground. Just looking at a few of the financing, not options, but some of the financing that we did on Offbeet Farm. Like I said, the storage and processing building, that was covered by a $50,000 microloan from the FSA. Our fencing and irrigation was an $11,000 term loan from the FSA. We got a $6,000 operating loan to get soil amendments and other supplies, and then a $12,000 5-year loan from ARRC for land clearing. And if you need money quickly, ARRC is a great place to get it. Application to like dropping in my bank account, I think it was a little over a week. They really saved me in a pinch. Is it worth it? So I put together, these numbers aren't exact, but it's pretty close to what was happening financially on my farm this year. A lot of people wonder what does it cost to run a storage operation, and like, what are you using in utilities? So my storage building uses electricity exclusively for heating and cooling, and running dehumidification and fans and all that. And in Fairbanks, where it's about 28 cents a kilowatt hour right now, it amounts to about $1,600 a year. So it's a, but it's not exorbitant. To pay loan service on the 2 ongoing FSA loans amounts to $4,600 and $1,900, and then just consumables, bags and things to pack up orders for storage crops. It's about just a few $100s. So all in all, we're only talking less than $10,000 to like do storage specifically at a fairly, for Alaska, a fairly large scale. Other costs from the farm, $25,000, add in depreciation, and we're up to $38,000 for total farm costs last year on kind of a cash basis. But we are generating a lot of income from sales. On less than an acre, selling storage crops, which are low value, sold $68,000 last year. Getting a few other sources of income from the NRCS and participating in a UAF research project that puts the farm total profit to just over 32,000, which I think for a farm that was its 4th season of operation, doing crops that are relatively low value. I think that this shows that storage is a path to running a successful farm and getting it off the ground quickly. I do want to say that I do think it's hard to make it with storage crops on small acreage. Anything less than, I think I write later, like 3/4 of an acre, I don't think you could pay yourself a livable income on anything less than that. When I think about, or when I hear about more traditional market farms' gross income, it's often much higher per acre than this. But I think the profit levels are really similar. And where that shakes out is that storage crops don't take a lot of labor to tend and plant during the summertime. Like there's a lot of labor in the harvesting, but most of the high labor costs that you get associated with making salad greens and tomatoes and cucumbers, you don't get that necessarily with storage crops. And so by keeping labor costs low, you can offset the fact that your income per square foot is low and have a relatively comparable profit margin. So replicating this winter storage model on other farms, like I just talked about, acreage matters. I've kind of already gone over this. I think that, yeah, like I said, about 3/4 of an acre to an acre is the minimum for a livable one-income farm. And that acknowledges paying your crew when they're coming, maybe 5 to 10 grand for helping you. I personally, I hire somebody about 10 hours a week during the summer, and then I get a crew of 2 to 3 working 20 to 40 hours a week during fall harvest, which is about a month. If you already have a walk-in cooler on your farm, that might work for winter storage. So you might be in a position right now to just start trying it. You don't have to put any other infrastructure up. This is caveated with the fact that you do need to worry about condensation. There's a whole thing where the vapor drive comes from different directions at different times of the year. And if your cooler is DIY, you probably should think carefully about running it as a winter storage space. You're going to have some condensation issues. But prefab coolers like these, this is from a farm in Washington. So those are prefab cooler panels. They're made with sandwiching polyurethane foam with metal on both sides. These things are made to deal with those moisture issues. And it's a great option for running a dual-use cooler. Reefer trailers, another great option. We visited one on Thursday. So you can get them here. Traditional root cellars need to be insulated if they're going to be used for commercial sales. For better or worse, quality standards as they are today, it's really, really difficult to have a traditional passive root cellar at the temperatures you need to maintain high quality veggies. And it's really difficult to climate control them without that insulation. There is a way around this. This is North Farm in the UP of Michigan. They have a passive root cellar that they do most of their winter storage in, but they also have a reefer trailer with some cool bots in it. And so during fall harvest, they're putting everything into the reefer until the root cellar has reached an appropriate storage temp. And so they're waiting till it's like at 35 degrees or so to move the entire everything that's packed into the reefer trailer into the root cellar, and then they can turn that off and lower their electricity costs. So there are workarounds if you're working with a more traditional root cellar, but you do need to have a way to cool your crops. Some climates in Alaska. So I'm in Fairbanks. The ground freezes on average by October 10th. So I can't leave crops in the ground. But maybe if you lived in Kodiak, you could leave some crops in the ground. I think that the less time things spend in storage, the better. There are some caveats to this. So as long as your veggies aren't being damaged by cold, they are protected from pests, that over maturation isn't a problem, which is a crop by crop thing, and your harvest can still be efficient. You can keep your crops in the ground. This was a year where snow was coming. We were in a pinch. We threw down some plastic tarps, and it snowed like 8 inches on top of them, and I don't recommend it. And as with anything, start small. This is a photo from my first farm in Michigan, where I was just doing a 15-member CSA and growing on a 1/4 acre. I lovingly called this the squash hammock, and I stored a few hundred pounds of squash. But start small. don't dive into anything too quickly, but I think you'll realize that this is a great opportunity to expand your farm and grow food for your community. So I think I have 5 or more minutes left. Great. For questions, yeah. Do you want me to bring the mic to them? You got it?
Mike, is it working? Okay.
Sam, have you thought about saving some of your vegetables and replanting them for saving seed and using your root cellar?
I have thought about that. Be, because I have the things, that's an option to me. I think maybe I'll try to do some carrot breeding once the farm kind of stabilizes, but we've been climbing the infrastructure curve up to this point and haven't had the bandwidth. But the option's there.
Do the traditional root cellars ever get too cold anywhere here? We're in Toke.
They can. The question was if you couldn't hear that. Do traditional root cellars get too cold? They can. The thing is that if you dig into the ground deep enough, the ground temperature should be whatever the annual mean temperature for your location is. And that's true no matter where you are. I know of folks with deep root cellars around Fairbanks. You know, even I saw some examples like in Lake Minchumina, where their stuff was not freezing, but it was insulated on top to stop that frost penetration. But if I were doing this commercially, not a chance would I have that left on its own. Yeah, I would have it thermostatically controlled. And you can do that with, they sell really inexpensive thermostats. Inkbird is a brand that you can get for less than $50, where you can plug like a small cheap space heater into it, and you can control the temperature within a degree. You know, and you've spent less than $100 to do it. They're awesome.
Yeah. I think it was like $25 or $30.
Yeah, yeah. They have humidistats too.
I wanted to ask about the big sacks that you have that you fill. You said they hold like 1,000 pounds of produce, and knowing from just chatting with you this weekend that you don't have like a forklift or any heavy operating equipment. So, and I don't imagine you hauling the 1,000-pound sacks. Like, how do you work with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because we don't currently have lifting equipment, and we should have lifting equipment coming from the RFSI grant. Woohoo! I've had my workaround has been loading these sacks in place. And so veggies are coming off the wash line in smaller containers. I'm leaving them in a small vented container in the cooler for a day to dry off and cool down, and then dumping them one at a time, usually 50 pounds or so at a time into these sacks. And how do I get the ones up top? I have a 4-foot rolling scaffold. The question was if I like the sacks because they're breathable. I like the sacks, one, because they're cheap, $20 to $30 a piece. They do allow a low level of air exchange, but I don't think that it's an ideal amount. So if you close the top, you're going to get condensation in the inside. But if you leave them wide open and your room is too dry, you're going to have floppy veggies on top. And so you have to kind of find that happy medium between desiccated carrots, which, by the way, are the best ones you'll ever eat, and moldy carrots that are wet. Yes.
Do you spend time looking through maybe once during the winter to make sure that there's not any rotten ones to try to get those out? Do you have time to do that? Or
No, I do not. this is part of like planning for loss. It's not practical to dig through, you know, if I have 4,000 pounds of carrots left at some point, it's not practical to dig through them. So I expect that there might be a core of rot. And I've found, you know, there is the saying that the bad apple ruins the bunch, and it is kind of true, but I've found with most of these root veggies, if you have one go bad, you'll lose everything within a few inches of it to mold, but it's not a total disaster.
Um, I'm not sure how long your CSA runs through the winter, but then do you just like, I'm sure there are some crops that you can put in like every week, or I know you do every other week, you know, like
Mhm.
say carrots or potatoes, but then do you just plan other veggies like say kale and cabbage, and you like, do you just plan them based on how long you know their storage life is, and your customers just know, oh, I better expect these veggies during this portion, and I guess which is like during the summer, but how do you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely don't plan to have any veggie in the CSA like longer than what its typical storage life would be. So the kale, you know, they're not going to see that more than once or twice at the beginning. Cabbage is something they'll see all year because it can last. There's, I think, let's see, kale is something that doesn't last. Kohlrabi start to go after 4 or 5 months. Squash, I try not to keep those past the end of January as you start to incur heavy losses. But many of the other things can go for quite a long time. And so it's just a matter of like finding the mixture of like colors and shapes and like making it exciting enough for the CSA to remain interesting.
Actually, in that vein, I was going to ask you if there's a new crop that you're thinking about trying in the near future. Is there something on the horizon?
Yeah, I'm going to be trying some new radishes this year. Going to get into the world of black radishes and watermelon radishes. Some customer asked for this weird crop called Scorzonera, and I've never grown it. It looks, yeah, if anybody's grown it, let me know. But, you know, if I polled my customers and gave them exactly what they want, they'd want, you know, like 30% carrots, 30% potatoes, 20% onions, and whatever's left of what's, you know, the rest of the stuff. So I don't grow potatoes on my farm. I should caveat that. I didn't say that at all. I buy them from another farm because I can't grow them profitably. If I look at my cost of production, it is bad. Yeah.
We have time for one more.
Woo.
If anyone has one last question. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on the, sorry.
Oh,
So why do you buy potatoes from other farms? Do you store them for them, or is
Yeah, so there's a number of reasons that I buy them from other farms. The overarching, like the biggest reason is that without specialized harvest equipment, when I look at my yield numbers and my like the amount I can sell them for and the amount of labor that goes into it, it just doesn't pencil out. So I don't grow them. There's another farm that can grow them profitably, and we work out a deal. I usually do it one of two ways. I either say they're going to sell them to me at a wholesale price, and I'm going to do the work of packing and sales and distribution, or they get to keep the retail price, but they're going to show up to pick up with everything pre-packed, and I'm not going to do any work. Thank you guys so much. This is the bitter end of a long, interesting conference. Thanks, guys.
Very much. Like Sam said, it's the bitter end. That was it. We don't have any more plenary sessions or anything like that. So we hope that you enjoyed the conference, and we will have a survey. Please tell me what you thought and what you want to see more of, what you want to see less of. We take all that feedback and we use it to plan the next conference. So yeah, thank you for being here. The next conference will be back in Anchorage. So we alternate every 3 years. We partner with the Alaska Farm Bureau, and we have the big trade show and all that fun stuff. So it'll be in Anchorage next time, November of 2026. And then after that, who knows, maybe off the road system again. Southeast has been floated. So yeah, I won't make any promises there. That's way in the future, 3 years from now. But yeah, next one in November 2026. Mark your calendars. All right. Thanks.